This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. SummerSlam 2005 is our topic today after a bunch of rambling mess at the top of the show. But we're going to start the build for SummerSlam on the July 4th episode. We got Cena and Chris Jericho brawling during a highlight reel, and that's going to start the WWE title program. We've also got Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan teaming up to defeat Kurt Angle and Carlito. But afterwards of the celebration, Shawn Michaels super kicks Hulk Hogan, and we're off to the races. We've got a new program. Talk to me a little bit about what was the work that went into putting together Shawn turning heel against Hogan and the whole program itself. Was there any hesitation from either guy on either side, or did these two trust each other from the beginning and then it deteriorated? How does this all come together? And I assume that part of the lesson that we learned at WrestleMania 18 was if you're going to put Hogan with somebody, fans are going to cheer him. So he can't be the heel like we tried to make him against The Rock. The fans wanted him babyface. So if somebody's going to turn heel in this scenario, it can't be Hulk. Do I have that right?
Well, I think that in looking at it, there was an initial reaction that do you need to turn either guy? And the feeling being that in reality, I think there were just going to be, and there were Shawn fans and there were Hulk fans. The overall feeling of this was taking the guy from the 80s and the guy from the 90s and putting them against one another because each had their own legion of followers and fans and what have you. So it was kind of a natural, but I don't think that really you had to turn anybody. And Shawn could do heelish things. Hogan did do heelish things, and their fans forgave them, and the other person's fans despised them for that. So it was just kind of playing into both men's personalities and not making a full-fledged, oh my God, this guy's got to be a heel. Yeah, we got there, but even as we got there, I think it was still divided somewhat.
When this is first proposed, whose idea is this? And do you remember both Hogan and Shawn being receptive to it?
In the beginning, yeah, both were very receptive to it. And it was a conglomeration of the writing team and getting to this match. And it might have been Michael Hayes even that first suggested the match, best of my recollection. But it was something that everybody was saying, if we could only get to this, this could be good. Because, again, you had the two heroes from two different eras.
What was the relationship like in 05 here, July, August 05 with Hogan and Vince? It feels like over the years they've sort of played hokey pokey. They've had their ups and downs. Were they on good terms here, or did it feel like Hogan in this era still had one foot out the door at all times?
I think especially during the times that Hulk came back, that there was always that feeling of, what's the trigger going to be this time? And for Hulk and Vince, look, they had, like any relationship, they had good times and they had bad times. So throughout this, it was post WrestleMania. So you're looking at, okay, is somebody going to be upset at payoffs or anything else, or is it time to take the summer off? So you had to weigh in all of that shit. And overall, I think that in the middle of this, in the meat of this, I think that Vince and Hulk had a pretty good relationship.
It's just weird to know that, he was here before during the whole Rock thing. That was 02, 03, but then he leaves. He winds up actually doing a show with New Japan, teases like he's going to do some stuff with TNA in 03 and did the whole attack with Jarrett at the press conference. But then when he goes into the Hall of Fame in April of 05, it feels like, hey man, we're back in it. And we had that big WrestleMania moment it just feels like we're trying it again, but we're not really here for the long haul. Was that sort of the vibe you got as well?
I think every time that you tried it, you were wishing you were. you're wishing that, man, this is it, and we can take it to the house. You know what I mean? It's like, finally, this is the one. Just things work out differently sometimes.
It's interesting too, because we've heard over the years, and certainly Shawn and Vince had their ups and downs, but it certainly feels like Shawn and Vince have had a much tighter relationship as a whole than Vince and Hogan. And it feels like, I don't know, this has got to be a special match even for Vince.
Yeah, I think so, because again, you look at the creations and what they meant to the company, and overall the support of the different fan groups throughout the years. There were loyalists on every single side, which made it a natural. And Hulk had that overreaching, just to everyone knew who the hell Hulk Hogan was. I think probably to this day, most people still do. So yeah, this was one of those that you needed to get while you had both of them on the books.
We talked a little bit about Hogan turning or Shawn turning heel, and you said you weren't sure that you had to turn anybody heel. Why did you ultimately decide on somebody does have to be the bad guy for us to tell this story, and it's going to be Shawn? And is there ever any consideration for it being Hogan? And was Shawn, just glad to be the heel?
I think that, again, just as I said before, as far as turning heel and what people would consider turning heel was to their audience and to their fans, they weren't turning heel. They were saying everything that was true, and they were doing what they wanted them to do. So both sides, both guys, in a traditional sense, turned heel.
Well, yeah. And to your point, and we've talked about this before, but the best movie villains don't believe that they're bad guys. They believe in what they're doing. And yeah, they may have some interesting ways of getting the job done, but their motivation is their belief, which is something that they're not waking up thinking, I'm going to go do bad things today. No, they say, hey, I'm going to rob a bank today, and that sucks, but I'm not going to try to hurt anybody, but I'm doing that to take care of my wife or kids or whatever. But they believe that they're doing bad things, but they're doing them for the right reason, if that makes sense.
Or they don't even necessarily believe that what they're doing is bad as much as necessary.
Right. So much to unpack here as we start to wind this show down, but we've got to talk about the main event. And Wade Keller would write, Shawn Michaels took a bad situation and made the best of it. With less than a week to go before the pay-per-view, sources say he was so frustrated with good faith negotiations with Hulk Hogan behind the scenes that he was considering insisting on a DQ finish to the match. He'd reached the point that he didn't want a job to Hogan under any circumstances. Hogan, though, apparently had creative control written into his deal, so he got to call the shots. He wanted to win with a leg drop clean, and that's the way it was going to be.
Well, let's address that. That's not true.
Okay. When Michaels accepted the match in the first place, he had never worked with Hogan before. Friends had warned him, saying Hogan was going to get what he wanted, and it was a mistake to not work out a finish ahead of time before agreeing to the match. Michaels figured he could play hardball too. In the end, he couldn't. The details aren't known, but ultimately Michaels was convinced by Vince McMahon that he had to do the match Hogan's way. Michaels had proposed a second match the next month, and it was considered it would allow both men to get two big paydays. Michaels also figured that he would go away 1-1 against each other. However, when Hogan talked about a second match, he talked about winning that one too. The second match discussed was a cage match, the one with the big blue bars, and it was the first one to escape. And Hogan proposed he beat Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam and then beat him at the follow-up cage match by crawling out of the ring before Shawn could climb over the top, and it would be a bloodbath. Of course, Michaels wouldn't go for that, so they went back to the original plan of just one match. Do you remember that being the case?
Well, originally we talked about we talked about doing 3 matches, and a lot of things were discussed back and forth, and it got to, Vince feeling, God, can we get 3? Should we just do 2, or do we just do the one big one and move on? So there was just a lot of uncertainty going into it, and that uncertainty then breeds the rumor mill and people to start buzzing about shit.
Here's what's unique about it. The match lasted more than 20 minutes, which is almost unheard of for a Hogan match, and Hogan bled heavily during it. Quote, those may have been the two negotiating points Michaels won. If he was going to do the job, he wanted the match to be special, and he wanted to quote unquote beat Hogan into a bloody oblivion before losing. After the match, Michaels shoved Hogan from behind, then offered a handshake. He told Hogan he just needed to find out for himself. It wasn't clear what he meant, but in reality, it probably meant a lot of things. He wanted to find out what it was like to work with Hogan in the ring, what it was like to work with Hogan behind the scenes, and what it was like to lay down for the leg drop. The public may never know the extent to which these two butted heads behind the scenes during negotiations, unless Michaels includes it in his upcoming biography. Michaels, though, got his revenge the next night. He came out with a smile on his face and accepted the cheers from the fans. And he says, as much as it hurt to admit it, Hogan was the better man the night before. And then the promo took a strange turn. He began to mock Hogan, sarcastically saying Hogan was cat-like and nimble, and he could never figure out his catch-as-catch-can style. Quote, I mean, his ring prowess was in so many ways and on so many levels superior to mine that I could not compete. When it was over, even I, the evil Shawn Michaels, found myself victim like so many before me to that vicious leg drop 1, 2, 3. And the crowd didn't know how to react. Some booed and some cheered, but most sat in silence. The crowd began a small chant of Hogan, Hogan, and Michaels continued, now back to our regularly scheduled programming and back to reality. The reality is this: Hogan is now on a jet back to Florida until you, the WWE fans, can give him what he wants. And then he signed a money signal by rubbing his thumb and finger together. I, Shawn Michaels, am here tonight to give you exactly what you want, the showstopper. My goodness. What can you tell us about the negotiation, the finish, and this promo the next night?
Well, first of all, the negotiation, I actually hit my mute button because I was laughing so hard, and I probably shouldn't have, because it's just so fucking ridiculous and speaks to the naivete of someone writing this crap that have never laid out a match, never sat in when someone has laid out a match and gone over things. Well, I'll agree to your things, but I've got to beat Hogan into a bloody oblivion before I lose.
Right. That doesn't make sense.
Well, it kills the credibility of anything else that they say, which they have no credibility. The match, the finish, everything about it was debated 9 ways from Sunday before they ever got into the ring, and for weeks ahead of time, trying to get 2 out of it, trying to get 3 out of it. What do we do? What's the first finish? What's the second finish? And in the end, through all of the machinations of, and I truly believe that deep down inside, both guys wanted to do business. I just think that both guys wanted to do business in a little bit different way. The end result, you look at the match was highly entertaining. And it was highly entertaining because of Shawn overselling shit and going fucking nuts and almost doing a parody of a Hulk match from 20 years ago. So to that, the entertainment value of it, it was incredibly entertaining. That may have been Shawn's nod to, hey, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to make you remember it because of my antics. Could it have been different? Absolutely, it could have been different. Was it the best thing? I don't know if it was the best thing or not. I think when Shawn first started overselling thing, the reaction was one of, what the fuck is he doing? Then the more that he did it, the more that you saw the story Shawn was telling. And Shawn was going to tell his own fucking story, which speaks to how good Shawn is. People may look at it as, oh, that's an expose, that's disrespectful, that's this, that's that.
You disagree?
I do.
Oh my gosh, he's like selling like a pinball. That one turnbuckle shot where he just slams his head. And how about
fucking kicks in the corner and all that shit?
The leg drop. He jumps up, runs around, and falls.
Yeah. That was a parody of Hulk matches from 20 years before. And that's Shawn's story. And that was Shawn telling you that story just to get deeper into it. Some people look at it one way, others look at it another way. I think Shawn fans would see it as Shawn doing what he had to do. Hogan fans would say, oh my God, how could they disrespect him and not just sell all of his shit the way that they thought it should have been sold. Hogan still did do all of his shit. Hogan still fucking got over in the end. And for me, from a creative standpoint, I would have liked to have gotten more than one out of it. I would have liked to, even if I just got to 2 and we had 1 and 1 and leave it at that.
Yeah, that would have been good.
The argument still stands. There was that pitch.
What about the
I still
promo?
wanted to go for 3 and blow it out somehow. But through all the machinations, through all the bullshit, that's where it ended up. And I think, once again, it was a situation where people go, okay, hey, we're going to, quote, work shoot, and the work turns into a shoot, and then feelings get hurt and people misunderstand because they feed into all the other bullshit.
Let's talk about the promo the next day. The promo the next day. God damn.
Oh, the promo the next day. But again, to Shawn's fans, that was dead nuts on. And it was dead nuts on. It took Shawn to the next place, and motherfucker was right back being a babyface again. To Shawn's fans, that was the right thing and the right thing to say and do.
Let me ask though, when he's out here sort of, oh, I couldn't keep up with his catch can style, and he's on a plane, but I'm right here, and this is what he wants from you. I mean, as an old school guy, are you not a little low-key offended when we're really just saying, this is all bullshit and you know it?
It was during a time that we were trying to be a little edgier and throw some of that real life rumor, innuendo bullshit into it.
You know what though?
Feed into it.
In fairness to your point, we talked about it earlier. Why would you publicize the negotiations with Lesnar? And then they even publicized the negotiations and discussions that Stephanie had with Dusty. This is probably the era where you guys were like, you know what? Fuck the quote unquote dirt sheets. Let's control the narrative. We'll just report our inside shit, and they'll have to come to us first.
And the fact of the matter is that, both guys, Hulk and Shawn, I think could have handled the situation better early on.
Let's talk about that. I've got some quotes here. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to try to run through this. By the way, I want to give a shout out. We had hundreds of questions. There's no way we'll get to do it today. We're going to try to do some on ad-free shows later. I'm already keeping Bruce way later. He's missing a meeting to do this, so we got to hustle. But Michaels addressed this whole fiasco during a Q&A in England a few years ago. He says, quote, we were going to do a best of 3, and in the last minute, he backed out. So that day, I'll admit this, I poked the bear all day. I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to go out there and do business, but I was going to make him earn it and just be a pain in his butt all day. And that was something I did for my own enjoyment. It wasn't right. It wasn't professional. The next year, Hogan had this to say about the match. If you really go behind the scenes on the Shawn Michaels thing, I just sat back. I mean, this is Vince's show, Vince's thing. When we went to the dressing room, Vince came in and said, okay, I want Hogan to go over. No big deal. Those were Vince's wishes. If he had told me to take the super kick and do the 1, 2, 3, even though nobody says I've ever done a job. If you go back and look at my career, I've pretty much lost more matches than I've won trying to get guys over, from Triple H to The Undertaker to The Rock, you name it. I don't win too many matches, but it's business. I'm trying to help these guys. So when Vince wanted Shawn to do the job, we went out there and had a match, and everybody said, oh, Shawn oversold. He was making fun of you. If Shawn was really doing that, you have to ask him, because I'd have to go take the turnbuckle. He jumps on the bottom rope and does a triple flip, which, okay, whatever. But he's done it several times, not just with me. And the reason that we didn't go longer was because I shut it down. The next day I was expecting to, return the favor, and then, okay, now you beat me up and I beat you. Let's build to a third match and keep the cage match and keep it going. But he was such a great worker. I thought we were going to have a great run. It Could be my fault. It could be my feelings were too much involved, but I thought the interview was going to be, I got to give a Hogan. He was better than me on that one night, but it'll never happen again. I was quicker and faster than him, but he just had that moment. He had the crowd with him. He had the momentum, but it'll never happen again. I'm asking you, Hogan, for another match. And I thought that's how we were going to do the business in this interview. But when he came out and said, oh, he was too fast, he was too young, I went, I'm out. I just told Vince, your boy, it's not business. So I pulled the plug on that deal, and that's where we ended up. It wasn't a creative control thing. I said, I don't want to go on if this is going to be a clown show from this point on. I thought if this guy really wanted to dig in and draw some money. And on the Shawn Michaels DVD, he says, in my mind, I present it to him as just good guy versus good guy. And the thing where HBK was just like, man, I got to know if I can beat the immortal Hulk Hogan. And then the next week, we find out it's classic babyface, heel versus Hogan, quote, like you're in 1998. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'd tear him up. I'd go out there on that mic and I would tear him to shreds. Give us that then. That's what we want. So I just thought, you got to be kidding me. Are you sure he's okay with that? And Vince told me Terry's business. And I asked him beforehand, are you sure he's okay with it? And Vince reiterated Terry's business. So when I see Hogan the next week, I asked him, are you okay with all this? And he says, no problem, brother. And I got news for you. If he denies it, I'll tell it to his face. I asked you before, I asked you every time, and work with me, brother. And I'm like, wow, some of the most successful people in this business are insecure. So there's two sides here. And I guess that's the old famous thing we break down on this podcast. The he said, she said, the my side, your side, and the truth somewhere in the middle or whatever. Where do you land on this? Do you remember Hogan being the one that pulled the plug after the Shawn promo the night after on Raw? Or is it more of what Shawn is saying here, that Hogan's just insecure?
They're both right. They're both right. As far as Hulk pulling the plug, Vince pulled the plug. And Vince was unsure even before the match if he wanted any more matches. It was Vince's call. And Shawn did run everything by Hulk. And Shawn was very concerned about the shoot stuff with Hulk and did ask every fucking time he did it. Make sure that it's okay. Are we good? And goddamn, you really want me to go that far? And the answer always was, yes, yes. And everybody did agree to it. And then I just think that it got into feelings were hurt. And he said, she said, and it turned into what it turned into. But yeah, they're both right. And it's a combination of all of the above. But they basically worked themselves into a shoot. I would have loved to have gotten 3 out of it. And I don't know what I would have done in the third match. I probably would have somehow thrown it out or ended up with them as a team. Who the hell knows? But regardless of that, the lead up to everything and where we got to, it just, could have been different. Could have been different.
Man, I got to tell you, I was disappointed in the match only because I felt like the bar had been set so high by Hogan Rock at WrestleMania 18. And no disrespect to The Rock, we know one of the greatest sports entertainers of all time. But when it came time for the bell to ring, as you like to say, I don't know that there were many ever better than Shawn Michaels. So when I see that and I see what Rock and Hogan were able to accomplish, it just feels so much bigger and better than what Shawn and Hogan did. And Shawn and Hogan certainly was a memorable match, and I'm not arguing that, but it doesn't feel like it had near the magic. And I can't help but wonder how much of that is just ego,
I think a lot of it is on everybody's part. So it just, it boils down to you're dealing with human beings and feelings get hurt. That's hard to stop sometimes. It's hard to turn it on and off. So that depends on the person.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.